Hello and welcome to MySecTV. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the Executive Editor with MySecurity Media, and welcome to our Tech and Sec weekly episode. This is our Tuesday afternoon episode, and today we're going to be focused on machine learning and artificial intelligence. I've got Jason Waller, the CEO with Intelicare, and they've just been awarded a $100,000 machine learning grant with Macquarie University and University of Sydney. So we're going to dive into Intelicare and how they're applying their AI. And then we're going to be joined by Omid Ejtemai, who's the CEO with PeakHour Urban Technologies. And they're going to be using AI with the Victorian Department of Transport and predicting traffic congestion with their benchmark of predicting traffic congestion within 3 hours. So both using machine learning, artificial intelligence algorithms, but in completely two different fields of study. So looking forward to this particular episode. For those that follow us, MySecTV, we cover on aerospace and space, defence and national security, cybersecurity and critical technology, and cities and infrastructure. And today we're obviously focused on the infrastructure and that critical technology. We should be streaming on YouTube, LinkedIn, and on Facebook. And we'll also stream one out to our Cybersecurity Weekly podcast. Today we'll go for at least 50 minutes to 60 minutes, I imagine, on this particular series. Just an update on what we're doing. In fact, I'm just hot off the heels of episode 1 of our Security Consultant Insight series. Very good session that was. These are being held every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Today we focused on high security design considerations, including master key locking systems with our panel. And next week we'll be looking at that physical and cyber security balance. So that can be accessed from the marketplace. Otherwise, you can go to our Learn Security platform and access the recorded and also the upcoming episodes. Just a catch up from last Friday, we looked at the state of cybersecurity with ISACA and their annual research report. Janai Marinkovic and John Brandt, they're in the US. Very interesting discussion, went for about 50 minutes, and that's also released as a podcast on the skills challenges of cybersecurity and technology. And interestingly, we ended up delving into AI and the use of AI in cybersecurity and networks on that as well. And coming up, I've just finished an interview with SentinelOne and their autonomous AI endpoint security with Evan Davidson and Kelvin Wee. So that'll come out soon with SentinelOne. So you can get a trend here in terms of AI, particularly around our domain of security, cybersecurity. And once again, just highlight our interview with Hyperfire, which is a Perth startup out of Curtin University, and their Firebug intrusion detection system, and also applying algorithms for monitoring networks. Very interesting piece of technology, and good to see it. Perth startup and new company. Just closed yesterday. In fact, I've got to close it off after this episode. So you've got probably 1 hour before nominations will close for the Top Women in Security ASEAN region. So if you have people in the region, in the 10 nations of ASEAN, please get them to nominate them. And our latest podcasts are out. I mentioned the state of cybersecurity and also cyber influence and misinformation with Stanford University. Welcome to check out the Cyber Risk Leaders magazine, and thank you to our sponsors, IT Glue and their How to Master IT documentation. This is very much focused on the managed service providers network and for companies. And also for Secure ID, RSA supporting us, and Secure Access or their flexible authentication for their multi-factor authentication solution. And also ALC for their cybersecurity certification courses are still running. So if you want to get certified, ALC is the one to go to. If you want to support the channel, check out our Cyber War series and our merchandise on mysectv.shop. But otherwise, that is enough from me on our MySecurity marketplace. And let me bring in Jason. I've put up the wrong slide there, Jason. Again, I had to change it, though I forgot one. Jason Waller. And let me just turn that one off so we can get your name right. I did mention that. So, Jason, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Pleasure to be here.
Very good. Now you've just received. I don't know if you've got the money in your bank account just yet, but you've been awarded $100,000 grant to further research into your machine learning. Maybe introduce us to Intelicare, who your partners are, and then we'll kind of dive into the intricacies of what you're actually doing. Very interesting.
So Intelicare turns any home into a smart home by installing a range of sensors around the home. We connect that to our IoT platform and then our AI engine, and we learn what's normal behaviour in that home with the aim to help the elderly and people with disability live in their homes for longer. So recently we partnered with the University of Sydney and Macquarie University to win a grant for $100,000 that will improve the machine learning capabilities of our platform, so that we not only detect trigger events that cause loss of independence, but start to get better at predicting those events before they occur in the first place.
And talk us through the sensors that you might be using and how many touch points you might have, and where the smarts are, because I think you touched on you use traditional sensors, but then the integration of those and making them all kind of give you a picture or a dashboard picture. Yeah, talk us through the sensors and how you get them to work.
So we use commercial off-the-shelf sensors. Most people, when they're aging in place, resort to old technology like a pendant or a duress system or a push button to let their family or caregivers know when something is out in the ordinary and they need help. Unfortunately, that's very fallible. In 80% of falls, people didn't use their pendant either because they didn't have it on them or it wasn't charged, or even in 30% of those cases, they had it on them, it was charged, and they didn't use it anyway. So we use non-invasive, non-wearable sensors wherever possible, things like the same things you'd find in your home security system, movement detectors, smart power switches, and door sensors and the like. We have a platform as a service, so the information is aggregated, and we track things like, have they arisen each day, what's the mobility like through the house, what's their bathroom usage, which can become particularly important. For example, if that increases overnight, it can point to an undiagnosed urinary tract infection. And UTIs are a primary cause of falls because it leads to delirium and then a fall. So we get away from people having to use wearables and compliance with that, which can be very poor, particularly in the aged care space, and use passive sensors and AI to look at that behaviour and find the patterns in it.
What if there's multiple people in the one room? How does that work?
Well, what we do is establish a baseline of behaviour in the house. So as long as there is a normal pattern, departures from those normal patterns are detected. So for instance, we've had some clients where we have a husband and wife, and one of those people has dementia or early onset dementia, and we've been able to detect that worsening dementia because we see increase in hyperactivity and even lower activity in the household, just attributed to that one person against the baseline.
And the type of sensors you mentioned, movement, are you using visual as well, say cameras, or can you apply visual over the top of that?
We very much avoid the use of cameras. The privacy is obviously a major concern for the elderly, and this notion of Big Brother watching them. And really it comes down to, what do you want to use a camera for? What is the information that you think you're getting from a camera that you can't get from the baseline sensor? Right. We have integrated an outstanding optical device that uses edge processing and machine vision to detect an immediate fall, so it can recognize furniture, animals and other parts of the house, different to a human being lying prone on the floor versus asleep on the couch or asleep on their bed. But none of that is captured as an image and it's not taken offline, and that's a particular niche case. So the beauty of our platform is we're sensor agnostic, and if there is a particular sensor out there that serves that purpose, we're happy to integrate it.
And do you put in the sensors? Is Intelicare, or what's the onboarding process from a client's perspective? And maybe that's a key question. Who is your client? Is it the care provider? Is it the end user?
The client really is the care provider or the family member. The end user benefits because they're able to stay in their own home for longer. and they also don't want to be seen as any kind of burden on their family. But it's the family and the professional caregivers who receive the benefit, because they're the ones that manage the interventions that might otherwise cause loss of independence. They can, for example, arrange for an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist or a nutritionist to come into the household. We monitor things like meal usage, and that has a correlation to both movement and things like infection. So we start to piece these elements of the puzzle together. Our primary clients are the elderly and people with disability, particularly those who receive some form of government funding and a package to receive their care. Our product can be paid straight out of those packages.
So the focus here is health monitoring. Is there a safety aspect too in terms of the quality of the care that they might be getting?
There's always a safety aspect, and we're very careful to make sure that we don't overstep the mark or claim things that we can do beyond what we can do. But it's a world away and a world beyond from what is currently available to them, which is just duress devices, which I liken to, if you've got a P-plater, like I've had a few, if you give them a mobile phone and say this is going to prevent the car accident, you're kidding yourself. It's going to tell you that they've had an accident and call the tow truck or the ambulance, but it's going to do nothing with regard to their driving habits and road safety. So I think of it like that. It's like having the road safety campaign that prevents an accident before you have to call for the tow truck.
And what's the onboarding process? So if someone feels that they want to use your product or service, what's the onboarding?
So we use the term an off-the-shelf product. It can be installed, self-installed straight out of the box. If you're capable of installing, say, for example, a Sonos sound system or a Wi-Fi mesh in the house, it's very similar to that. We have a hub that connects to the internet in the home, and then each of the sensors is connected through that hub. For about half of our clients, we also arrange installation through a professional installer. And that's because typically their family members aren't nearby. They're not in the same state or remote, which is why they're using Intelicare in the first place. And so that in particular instance will arrange for a professional installer. But it's a very simple, straightforward process.
Just a question on the installer. Who do you tend to use? Because you've either got a licensed electrician or a licensed security installer. I don't know who else would be licensed to put that in. I'm talking from a probity perspective here.
There's no licensing required because there's no hard wiring required in the household. So it's been horses for courses in the locations we've serviced. So we've used, for example, Jim's Group, antenna and security. We've also used local smart home installers, as well as individuals who are proficient in installing, for example, internet and modems and those kinds of things.
Okay.
What we're most concerned with is they have a police check and that they have the right aptitude for dealing with the elderly.
Well, talk us through the grant. What's the background to the grant? Now, this is the grant was been awarded to or by the New South Wales Smart Sensing Network in conjunction with the University of Sydney and Macquarie University. It's great to see, and you're a Perth-based company too, so well done for getting that money out of New South Wales. They're pretty tight with it over here. Maybe talk us through the background to the grant, and I take it this is probably not a new thing. Yeah, how does all that work in the partnership?
Well, we've been working pretty closely with the University of Sydney. It's a prestigious organisation, and they brought in Macquarie University as well. And we've been setting up a program for them to engage with us and improve our machine learning through their computer science department, but also across their other departments that deal with ageing and healthcare. So they were the leaders and discovered that this grant was available. They brought in Macquarie University, their computer science department, who are also excellent and very innovative. And so we have a multidisciplinary team approach, because it's not just about the technologists. It has to be about those who are expert in ageing, and particularly gerontology and the signs of ageing and loss of independence.
Well, and I've noticed in the notes here, your company's putting in 150,000 and the universities are putting in another 160. So we're almost at a sort of a $350,000, $400,000 investment into this. Is this related, or any of the outcomes related to the Royal Commission into aged care, or is that a bit of an impetus there that you think has provided an extra business case?
Well, the subject of ageing is incredibly topical, right today with the introduction once again of COVID into a residential aged care facility. And so consequently, the New South Wales Smart Sensing Network, which is a New South Wales government initiative, has ageing and resolving the issues around ageing as one of their major themes, what they call mega challenges. So we fell off the back of that. The Royal Commission has been a huge impetus. In fact, Intelicare was cited in the final report as an example of a company using innovation to solve for some of the complex problems around aged care. Because what we're trying to do is prevent someone's progression along that aged care journey. So we look at relieving the burden on hospitals and residential facilities by catching events further upstream before they require more complex and much more expensive care. So by doing so, we start to address some of the structural issues around the aged care industry, which is basically there's not enough staff to meet the demand of the baby boomers moving from their retirement phase through to their aging phase.
And are you aggregating the data as well? Because we're about to talk about traffic congestion. So you're talking about an individual client in their own individual behaviour and health, and then are you aggregating that in total to go, well, that may not be unique to that particular user, but overall we're seeing an overall sign that there's a population change. I don't know, how are you kind of putting all that data together? Is that part of the research?
I see that in the blue sky.
Okay.
So the first stage of our research is to get the data into a format where it can be read and assimilated by machine learning neural networks, for instance.
Yeah.
We haven't yet aggregated it at that level, but we see that definitely as part of the future and to improve clinical studies, while protecting the privacy and concerns of the individuals who actually own the data at the end of the day. So once we get our data cleansed in a format where we can start to really apply these machine learning techniques, then naturally I think looking at broader cohort-wide trends rather than individual trends starts to become really important.
And if it's, say, in an aged care facility, across the facility, and something that came out of the Royal Commission, particularly around the CCTV use, is that privacy aspect. Is this something you can apply across an aged care facility and have the facility or the manager as the client? And
Absolutely.
where does that privacy sort of cross over between what is healthcare versus what is personal monitoring, if you know what I mean, in terms of that,
Sure.
that fine line?
So our first customers have been in the home care industry. So there's about 1.2 million people who actually receive home care support. It's much bigger than what people might think of in terms of aged care, primarily being around nursing homes. There's about 200,000 people in nursing homes, so 1/5 of that home care market. Nevertheless, our product is suitable for residential aged care, and it will allow those care providers not only to detect the incidents they might otherwise miss through staff can't be everywhere at once, but also understand the complex needs of their clients as they start to age, and therefore increase the funding that's available there for them. In terms of privacy, it's really about the rights of the individual to manage their risk. So what they are doing here is looking at the risks as they wish to see it, and allowing us to use their data and their carers and family to use their data to reduce that risk. So we put the independent adult at the center of this. It's their data and it's their life. So they've got to be able to have control over that.
Do they sign up? There's obviously an opt-in and they sign in. Is that all electronic? And then is there an opt-out?
Yeah, so as we said before, the client really is the caregivers and the family members who are the ones that procure. And we require them to ensure they have consent from the independent adult before the system goes in.
Okay. Maybe talk us into the company. You're an ASX listed company, and I think you mentioned 2017 pre-interview. What's the background to the company? What's the pedigree in being in this space? It sounds like this isn't necessarily a new play, but it certainly sounds innovative.
So the company was started by our co-founders in 2017 when they received the WA Country Health Service Royalty for Regions grant, with the purpose being to build this kind of technology to help people in regional Western Australia stay in their country towns and not have to move to the city to access aged care and those kinds of services. And our original customers are still out there today. We've got a 93-year-old woman who is blind and elderly, who's staying in her own home in her country town because with her stepdaughter in Perth. Since then, they spent about 2 years from 2017 to 2019 developing the technology. And then 2019 to 20, we sought funding and achieved listing in May 2020 on the ASX. Since then, we've been executing on our commercialisation strategy.
And where are you operating? Is it just Australia at this stage, or are you able to operate from anywhere? What's your scale?
Our strategy was to get it right in Western Australia before we expanded onto the East Coast, because obviously there's always, with any new technology, bugs and wrinkles to be ironed out. And we've largely done that, although there's always things we'd like to improve in the system. We have a significant number of clients both in New South Wales and Victoria, and some in Queensland. And now that we've got that settled, we're starting to look at overseas opportunities, and particularly in the USA, Canada, and the United Kingdom.
Just back to the ML, are you using standard algorithms and it's just a matter of picking up the right sensors and then getting, where's the smarts, what you've done in terms of you've built the dashboard and applied basic machine learning algorithms? And you mentioned there's probably a bit of AI in the background. Is anything new in terms of the algorithms, or is this just what we're seeing in a sort of IoT industry 4.0 of what is capable?
Well, I think AI is a very broad spectrum, and machine learning is a subset of that spectrum in the Venn diagram. So we've been using artificial intelligence to learn what a baseline of behaviour is in a household. When someone gets up, what their normal pattern of meal preparation is, whether they've prepared a meal at all, and what their normal movement looks like, and then send out alerts when there's deviations to certain degrees from that. The machine learning element is training a specific algorithm to look for a specific type of incident, and that we haven't yet done that. We've begun it with falls detection, and now we're using it for prevention of those incidents. So we're moving from detection through to prevention. We're hosted on the Microsoft Azure platform, so we've aggregated a number of those tools and applications to build our platform. But there's nothing particularly unique about ML. A neural network piece of code is only about 70 lines long. It's not complex. There's nothing, and it's all open source. There's not a lot that's particularly new in that space. What the first phase of this project will be about is identifying what is the best form of machine learning to use, whether it's assisted machine learning or non-assisted, or a combination of those elements, and what fits with the data the best. And that's where the expertise really starts to hit the road, rather than in the algorithms themselves.
And what about staying on track in terms of, because our audience is strongly security, so I sense there's a security play here as well, even just generally domestic home security. You talked about detecting falls. Well, you could potentially detect a new or a foreign body in the house if it's a burglary or something like that. But then also around just the general home and the way that all the sensors in the home are performing, and preventative maintenance. You're very focused on sticking to user and health, and not expanding out and adding in to that platform other types of ML.
It's one of those things that in a startup, it's really important at the outset to stay focused and not chase every shiny trinket. And when you're dealing with software developers, they're very keen to work on their individual science projects. And so part of my role is keeping that core. That doesn't mean we don't look adjacent left and right to what's available to us. And asset protection has been something that is on our agenda. And in fact, we have a test rig here in the office that integrates things like smart smoke alarms and circuit boards and RCDs to look after a home, particularly in the social housing environment. This could be particularly important. And our asset could be, our platform could be modified to produce that kind of product in the end. But it's a question of making sure we get it right with what we're doing first before we expand.
Are you working with other partners in that particular space, or again, you're an ASX listed company, so you're going to be commercially driven? But do you find you're working with partners? I can rattle off half a dozen over there in Perth right now. That I don't know where you're based, whether you're in Bentley or elsewhere, but there's a few in this area.
Yeah, I used to be down in Bentley in my previous gig when I was with Spookfish, which was a geospatial imagery company.
Right.
But no, we're in Leederville in Western Australia, close to the city. And we have a number of partners that we work with. And that's part of the beauty of our platform, because it is cloud-based and because it's open architecture, we can integrate with other platforms as well.
Very good. Well, look, we've got our next guest in the background there, so we'll bring on Omid and move over to the traffic congestion. And you're welcome to stay on, Jason, backstage. It might be of interest too. But I think we're going to have a very similar discussion, but not necessarily talking about an individual, but more traffic. So Jason Waller, the CEO of Intelicare. Very, very interesting. And if I was to, let me just bring and share my screen so we've got the slides right. And apologies for your name. I've fixed that now. And so Jason Waller, CEO with Intelicare, definitely the ASX listed company. So one to watch. What's your ASX code?
ICR, iCare.
ICR, iCare. So one to watch. And hopefully, good luck in the future. And stay in touch in terms of your security applications, but then also we'll monitor this moving forward with the University of Macquarie University and University of Sydney.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. I'll put you backstage. Very good. That was a multidisciplinary research team will build machine learning algorithms to predict and prevent events that are likely to impact the quality of life of the elderly. So thank you to Jason. Now, our next guest, Omid, I do hope I'm saying your name correctly, Ejtemai, and bring you on now, the CEO with PeakHour Urban Technologies. Omid, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Very good. You just caught the sort of the second half of that interview. Did much of that ring bells with you in terms of the application, trying to stay on track with machine learning and AI?
Sorry.
Can you hear me okay?
I had muted you. Sorry, I thought I should be on mute, so please repeat the question.
All good. Well, firstly, thank you very much for joining us. Let's start again.
Thank you for having me.
Good on you. You might have caught the second half of that interview. We were just talking about the application of machine learning in a domestic environment for protection of the elderly. One of my last questions there was, how do they stay on track? Because there's so many different applications of this technology. Maybe introduce us to PeakHour Urban Technologies and how you're applying artificial intelligence. And your gambit is you're going to be predicting traffic congestion within 3 hours of it potentially occurring. So over to you to introduce us to PeakHour Urban Technologies.
Thank you very much again, and thank you for having me. I could relate very much to what your previous guest said, that machine learning, it's such a broad spectrum of technologies, and machine learning is one of them. Certainly, we are using machine learning for predicting traffic, and we believe that the technology is mature enough now, and not just the technology, that the depth of data, available data, is such that we can actually build these platforms to predict traffic. So a little bit background about PeakHour technology, and actually why the idea. Urbanization is real, everyone knows that, and cities are becoming larger. There is an unstoppable migration of people from rural area into cities. We all know that, we all feel that, and because of that, the cities are growing, and obviously mobility and transport is a big aspect of it. In the past, the response has been to build more roads, but that is a very expensive exercise, but also more importantly, we're running out of space in big cities. So we don't have space for building new roads. So technology is the only solution there that can help. And in the past, to help with these situations, the organization have created traffic models because data wasn't available to the extent that it is today. And the innovation that we are doing here at PeakHour is to utilize data and build machine learning algorithm with which we can very accurately predict traffic. And that is significant because unless we predict, we are reacting. In order to proactively deal with traffic situation and be able to optimize it, we need to be able to predict. And that's what we have done. That's our starting point in the platform that we have created.
Well, I'm reading the release here. University of Melbourne's Australian Integrated Multimodal Ecosystem, or AIMS, brought together PeakHour Urban Technologies, the Victorian Department of Transport and Telstra to create a large-scale AI application hosted on AWS and can predict traffic conditions across Melbourne. As we just learned, it's the data points, really, the sensors that you might be using. And obviously with Telstra in there might be some mobile networks and other related traffic. What's your data points? What's your sensor network looking like? Because most cities now have vehicle counting, there's CCTV across the road network too. Yeah, what's your sensors and the analytics that you'd be using?
Yeah, currently we are ingesting speed data, and actually part of the partnership that we create is also with TomTom. So we are reading TomTom speed data on minute-by-minute basis, but also we are ingesting count data. We are lucky in Australia and in Melbourne, of course, that we have a system called SCATS. So at intersection, that is the technology that is being used to calculate the signal timing that is adaptive and adjust to the traffic. But part of that, they are also loop detectors. And based on the partnership that we built as part of AIMS, you mentioned, with Department of Transport, we got access to the live data. So we are ingesting also every 5 minutes data that is coming directly real time from DOT servers. We are ingesting that, and combined with speed data, we are analyzing the data real time on the fly, and that is our IP, to have machine learning components that are custom designed for traffic and making sense of that data. Because data obviously, is important that we analyze it, but we also need to understand the nature of the data and what we are looking for, so that we can understand the patterns and be able to predict the patterns that are short-term in future. So that's what we are doing, but that's just the beginning. There are other sources of data that we like to be able to work with. We are experimenting in our research lab. For example, I'll give you just one example, weather information and how weather actually influences traffic. And there are cities that it influences in a significant way. For example, if it rains or it snows, and there are cities that we see that impact to a lesser degree. So we are very interested in different types of data. We're experimenting that, and that is just a beginning to work.
How are you managing all this? Is getting crunched in an AWS environment, is it? How are you controlling the cost of the processing? Because it'd be like traffic management systems. You almost move into a high HPC environment where you're using, particularly when you're talking about weather systems as well. That's high performance computing. There's a bit of a cost management here. So there was that, and then before I let you go, is the user interface, how you present that data to a user. I imagine you're in the operations center, traffic operations center. That's really where they wanted to know this is at. Or is it on a user app, which will tell the driver, hey, you're moving in and we want to redirect you. So firstly, how are you managing costs on the processing. And then the second, we'll talk about the user interface and who is this for.
Yeah. So when we speak about cost, of course, we also need to speak about value. So as long as that ratio is right. So AWS actually is providing a very cost-effective environment for these type of solutions. Cloud is perfect. It gives us the scalability that we need. It gives us the security that we need and the computing power that is adjustable and grows with the need. So it's actually perfect for us and for this type of solution. And as I said, compared to the value, I believe is very, very cost effective. And we are very happy to have this partnership with AWS. In terms of how this data is being, how the result is being used, we have, of course, an application ourselves that we use to demonstrate the results and make it available and visualize. Basically, it's a map-based application that to visualize the results and predictions and the potential congestions in say up to 3-hour horizon. However, we don't expect that everyone is going to use our application. We have developed an API based on open standards that we would offer and we are offering to organization, to any third party who likes to implement and take advantage of that data, and potentially also app that could be disseminate information to end users. So one of the potential application of the system is travel time information that is based on prediction. Not based on the current travel time, but also based on...
So it changes and adjusts itself based on real-time data.
Exactly. Based on real-time data and also predicted data. So if there is a journey of 2 hours, if we can work with predicted times, it's going to be the calculated travel time, and ultimately routing could be much more accurate. So there are a number of applications that are conceivable that we can create based on these predictions.
And I take it this is where the AI plays. It's not just machine learning of what that traffic behavior is and then predicting it, but there's an AI, because if you reroute, then that changes the prediction, right? So there's an ongoing, is this just learning? Are you just letting it go and seeing that this will learn on its own? Because again, it becomes so complex. You're going to need an AI to be able to do it. And then how do you control it? And how do you know it's right? So there's a few questions there. I'm sorry, but you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. And you said it. That's a key point. That's the key point. And I'm just concurring with you because that's exactly what it is. The system learns by itself. And what is also very important in that aspect, you mentioned earlier the point that is really key, and that's cost. And a system that doesn't adjust automatically and doesn't learn becomes an additional cost because it constantly needs to be maintained and recalibrate and readjust it. And this system that we have created and is based on machine learning and AI, it learns by itself. So it self-learns and it adjusts to new traffic patterns. So for example, in Melbourne, we are in lockdown, and the traffic pattern this week is much different than the
I can even predict it this week.
Exactly. And so the system adjusts itself and learns, and we see that on the fly it adjusts, and the predictions are, again, the accuracy of them are maintained.
That's an interesting one. How do you tell an AI that, don't worry about it this week, unfortunately we're in a lockdown? How does it know that? Because that's quite foreign, in terms of just general traffic flow. For traffic to stop across a city, we've never seen it in our lifetime before, and it's actually happening. Doesn't that throw it off slightly? Like how, maybe back to the question of how long do you anticipate the system to work? Is it going to take a sort of a 365 days of data to understand what that next day might be compared to last year, compared to yesterday? Are you inputting other sort of calendar, you talked about the weather. How much input is put into this, or is it simply learn on the fly and it will learn, or you need to train it to a degree, right?
Yeah, we have done this exercise a number of times. So right now, when we start our database or our system with a blank database, within a day, we see actually reasonable predictions. And within a week, we get to a point that is really accurate,
Yeah.
accuracy that we need. So I'm very happy with that result.
Do you have a set of data already? Like, does the traffic systems and your partners already have traffic data that it's uploaded to? It's not just starting from scratch, or is working with data sets already?
Yeah, we can. There is historical data, and we can work with historical data. But again, we could also start with the basically blank database, and as real-time data comes in within a day, it starts to predict really with good accuracy, reasonable accuracy, and within a week we are basically up to a level that the accuracy is really, really good. So in terms of training, it's really 1 week all we need, which is fairly fast for this type of application. And your other question, sorry, you had another question.
Was more that backup data and then how you apply that and how long it would take, but you've kind of answered that you only need up to a week.
Sorry, I remembered your question. So in terms of adjusting to new patterns, if the shift is sudden, obviously it could become an issue if there is a sudden change in traffic pattern. But if it's rather slow, which we call drifting, we adjust very well to it.
Yeah.
But
and is it speed?
Is
it vehicle speed that you think is the key here, where it's monitoring the speed? Because you think about the sort of the Google apps where they're monitoring where their phones are, so you kind of get the red zone on your traffic, knowing that there's a whole bunch of phones all congested there. How much difference is it, say, from the Google app, which is sort of phone-based and network-based, versus actual vehicles and speed-orientated?
Yeah, I would say the speed information that we get from TomTom is also phone-based.
Yeah,
so
right.
the data is coming from that source, but we augment it obviously with flow information and with volume information. So our predictions are combined based on both information. I think that is the key to have that the kind of accuracy.
Okay. Well, let's maybe just finish off as we can with PeakHour Urban Technologies. And I noticed you're in crowd management too. Had a look at your website. Maybe talk us to that, because that'll be our audience ears will prick up if they hear about crowd management in the security context.
Yeah, look, crowd management is quite important in many aspects, especially if it gets to a level, especially, for example, the social distancing now with COVID in crowded areas such as airports or train station, metro station. So what we do, which is innovative and groundbreaking, is we combine known data, for example, train schedules or metro, and we combine that with information that comes based on image processing in cameras, and in real time we can predict crowd densities. So we don't predict crowd movement, because obviously it's very difficult to exactly predict the trajectory of people, but crowd density we do with also good accuracy. That is important, that we can basically create alerts for those who need to know. If we predict, for example, that the density within a train station or metro station or airport goes above a certain threshold, that is considered safe for that environment. And that's what we do, and that's fairly new, the technology, which is also, again, based on AI.
And do you have partners in that, or is that something you're just applying the very similar AI, but to a different system, transport system or the like? And the other question is, can you simulate it? Can you feed in different data? Because I'm thinking in a security context, we'll often think about crowds, crowd movement, density in risk assessments as well. How much do you think you can play around with this?
Yeah, so we do have a simulation tool, which is an offline simulation tool, which we can use for planning.
Yeah.
We also have built an interface to a VR system, virtual reality system, where you can go in and actually also for training purposes, you can create obstacles, you can define the space and play different things or different scenarios. So that's a planning offline tool that we can use. In real time, I would say is fairly difficult to predict exact trajectory and simulate. And I don't believe that people, in many cases, is necessary. It's the density that is important from a safety perspective.
Nice. And PeakHour, what's your pedigree? How long have you been around? And you're based in Melbourne, I'm assuming?
Correct. We are head office in Melbourne. Yeah, we are a startup, I would say. So we've been around for about a year.
Oh wow.
And we have a rather small but talented team, and all technical and focused on innovation and create new technology. So we is a multidisciplinary approach that we have. So we have experts in machine learning, experts in traffic and traffic engineering, but also experts in software development. So we bring all these people together, and we have been able to create these platforms.
Have you got some seed funding to kick it off the ground?
It's all self-funded so far.
Okay, well, you're the CEO, so Omid, it's been a pleasure to meet you, and it sounds a very interesting startup. It's great to see another startup out of Melbourne in this particular field, so it's definitely one to watch. What's the business model then? What's the strategy? You obviously need a proof of concept here in Melbourne, and then you want to be able to scale that or sort of license it out as an API elsewhere.
Absolutely. So that was a proof of concept, and we wanted to demonstrate that these solutions are real and they actually work and produce results. We are working with cities, and we like to work with cities. We believe our technology can help cities. Again, if we predict, we can also optimize, and we're also working on optimization technologies, and we can help cities become livable and sustainable, reduce emission, reduce congestion. So that's our business model, to work with cities, but also with, for example, private operators, toll road operators. So we are talking with them, and there's quite a bit of interest.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very interesting technology, and I work a lot with cities, so I might be in touch offline, and we'll see what we can come up with. Particularly, I always like the VR aspect, and the simulation exercises will be interesting. So, look, am I saying your surname correctly, Ejtemai?
Ejtemai, yeah, but that's a mouthful. So Omid is fine. Most people know me by Omid.
Okay. Omid, thank you so much. The Chief Executive Officer for PeakHour Urban Technologies there in Melbourne. Absolute pleasure as our second guest on our machine learning and artificial intelligence episode. Thank you very much. I'll let you go and put you backstage. And the story link is on our Smart Cities channel as well. So thank you, Omid. Have a great day.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And
best of luck for Melbourne to get out of this lockdown sooner rather than later. It's not looking good.
I'm sure.
Cheers, Omid. All the best.
Thank
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, very good. And I'm just going to bring up my other slide here just to close off. So we've looked at AI and machine learning applied for elderly, and AI and machine learning applied for predicting traffic congestion and crowd density. Just to finish off on our report of the day, get rid of that one. I'm I'll blow that up for you. Wrong one. Protecting the workforce, and it almost covers off a little bit of what we've just been talking about. So Hogan Levels and Forcepoint have got together and done a new report. This is the report of the day, Protecting the Workforce and Information in a Global Landscape, a legal review. And this covers off on UAM, or user access monitoring, and what you might be finding in terms of the legal requirements for workplaces. So as an enterprise, you might be monitoring temporal metadata. So that's their log on, log off, session length, monitoring use of privileged access, such as admin accounts, and then monitoring your workforce in terms of their applications, their emails, employer-provided devices, their internet browsing, capturing their on-screen activities, their key logging, and monitoring behavior on social media and other channels, and then they're monitoring employee-owned devices, or their BYOD. Interesting one to look at. We'll put this on the marketplace. It's not us, just literally came out today. So a good one from Forcepoint and Hogan Lovells in terms of the legal requirements and the considerations you need when you start to look at user activity monitoring and those types of things. And we've definitely covered it on today in terms of protecting the elderly and all those touch points, and then also out to a city broad approach as well. So a good one there. That'll be on the marketplace by tomorrow. So that's it from the marketplace today. Very interesting. Thank you very much for joining us. And we'll be back on Friday, I should be. Otherwise, please sign in to our Security Consultant Insights series. That's returning on June 8 at 1 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time, where we'll be looking at physical and cybersecurity crossovers in high security environments. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and thanks for joining us on MySecTV.